This morning is sort of like an introductory message, and we're going to start with Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Matthew 7, 24 to 27. This is the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' conclusion to his great sermon. This is what he says. He draws this dividing line between himself and any other foundation for life. He says this: "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Lord God, again we come to you in prayer. We ask that for this time, for these moments, that our hearts would be in tune with what your Holy Spirit wants to speak to us. Use me, Lord. Anoint me for this. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, some people are more organized than other people. I'm sort of somewhere in between, being completely disorganized and being very well organized. But one of the things I like to plan for is vacation. So if we're planning a trip, I like to have some sense of what we're going to be doing on that trip. I like to come up with a little bit of an itinerary, like to gather some information, get some brochures, go online, hotels.com, check out the reviews of the hotels and that sort of thing, so we make sure we have the best experience possible, get maps and things. Now, the cool thing now is apps. Most cities that you're going to see will have an app for their city that you can download right to your phone, and it's got all this tourist stuff built right in. Those are great. You do up a little bit of a budget. If you're traveling someplace foreign, you might want to learn some of the language before you go. So we like to plan. I like to plan. Probably you do too. If you're going on a vacation, you like to plan ahead. Another thing that a lot of people plan for in life is weddings. We have a wedding coming up here this weekend at the church. And, a wedding planning involves a great deal of planning, as most of you know if you've been through a wedding. The dresses, the tuxes, the hall, the minister, the church, the food, the decorations, the DJ, the speeches, the guest list, all these things that you have to think about. Then there's retirement planning. A lot of you are, moving towards that stage of life if you're not already there. And you're thinking about retirement, and you're planning your finances, you're planning your living situation, you're planning for health considerations and all these sorts of things. Some people even make plans for their own death, right? And there's sort of a whole industry around that now, and they encourage you to plan ahead, and I think that's wise, actually. But prepaying for your funeral arrangements, picking out your own casket, planning your funeral, planning the music you want, who you want to conduct the funeral, who's going to be the pallbearers. A lot of people have this already laid out. I know because I meet with families all the time, and they say, here's exactly what they want for their funeral. And other people say, oh, they have no plans. They have no plans at all, whatever you think, Pastor. They have a will, right? You have a will in place that says who you want your things to go to. I know one person in particular who has actually taken masking tape, and they've put masking tape on the backs or bottoms of all of the belongings around their house with people's names on it. This is who it's going to when I die. Man, that's going to make things so much easier for everybody when they're dividing things up, right? That's a smart move. Most of us spend a lot of time planning and preparing for what's to come in this life, and that's wise. That's good. I was a Boy Scout for years. I was in Beavers, then Cubs, then Scouts, and then Venturers. And the Boy Scout motto, does anybody know what the Boy Scout motto is? Be prepared. Exactly. It's a great motto for life. Be prepared. Well, you know what I find strange is that as much as people plan for all these different stages of life and activities and events, yet many people spend very little to no time planning for eternity. Isn't it odd that even sometimes, if you go to the next slide, please. There, yes, thank you. Isn't it odd? Sometimes even the smartest people, the most well-educated people, brilliant minds, brilliant scholars, sometimes rarely give the afterlife a second thought. I find it especially remarkable when you consider that this life is short and temporary, and the afterlife is long and permanent. And yet we spend so much time planning for the events of this life, even our own death, even our own funeral, and yet sometimes we take very little time, many people, no time, planning for the afterlife. James chapter 4, verse 14 says, "What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." We are all going to die. Some of us sooner than others. But the big picture of eternity, in the big picture, all of us have only a tiny amount of time to live in this life. In the big picture, this life is very short, very temporary. The human mortality rate is 100%. Now, I wanted to do an illustration to kind of highlight this, and I've done this before. But it's really, for me, this is one of the best illustrations I've seen. I didn't come up with this. Okay, this rope, I want you to imagine this rope is a timeline of your life. All right? And I want you to imagine that this rope, as it goes over there, it continues to go through the church, and it goes out the door, and it goes all the way across town, and it goes all the way across New Brunswick, and it goes all the way around the world. Just keeps on going over and over around the world forever with no end. That's how long this rope is. Now this red part on the end of this rope, this part represents the amount of time in this timeline of your life that is spent on this earth. This is like the 100 years, 102 years if you're lucky, that you get to spend on this planet. Oops. Okay? And the rest of the rope represents eternity. Now, it's interesting that we focus so much attention on this tiny little red part, and yet sometimes so little on this. You know, we as we're teenagers, you know, we can't wait till we get out of the house and we get to this part, and then we can't wait to get our education over and get to this part and get a job and do this part. And we work and work and work and work so we can get to this part where retirement so we can enjoy this little part right here at the end, right? And travel and do all sorts of fun things and have a great little part in this part. Well, what about this part? Isn't that enormously more important than what happens in this part? And so, the amazing thing, too, is that what happens in this little short red part determines how and where you spend this part. And as we'll say over and over in this sermon series, and as I say pretty much every Sunday, the deciding factor on where you spend eternity is not the good or bad that you do in this little red part. It's what you do with Jesus in this little red part. Do you trust in Him? That's what decides how you spend the rest of eternity. Now, many people don't give eternity a second thought. Maybe it scares them. Maybe it makes them uncomfortable to think about their own death. And so they ignore it and hope that it works out for the best. That's some people. I don't want to think about that. Don't talk about that. Other people, they do think about it, and they're searching for answers. They want to know. They want to know what happens on the other side. What's to come? And so people are searching. A lot of people are searching, and that's why I'm doing this series, because I think there's a lot of people with questions. Even some of you who've gone to church for years may have questions about what's to come. And I think it's important that we talk about it. But many people turn to unreliable sources. Many people turn to unreliable sources for answers about the afterlife. You know, you can construct whatever picture of the afterlife you like. One that makes you feel good. One that gives you confidence about your own future. But just because you like it doesn't mean it's true. Let me say that again. Just because you like it doesn't mean it's true. Just because you're putting yourself in heaven, for whatever reason, and you've got this picture of what heaven is going to be like, that doesn't mean that it's true. And likewise, just because you might not like what the Bible teaches about the afterlife doesn't make it untrue. So our quest in matters like this shouldn't be to believe what makes us feel good, but to believe the truth, to discover the truth. In Matthew 7, as I read there, Jesus talks about the wise and foolish builders. The wise builders are the ones who build their house upon the rock, and the foolish builders, the ones who build their house upon the sand. And Jesus explains that the one who builds their house upon the rock are those who hear the words of Jesus and do them. In other words, those who trust in Jesus, those who hear his teaching, hear that Jesus is the Son of God, and believe that and follow him. And he explains that those who build their house on sand are those who hear the teachings of Jesus but don't do them. In other words, those who choose not to follow Christ, who hear about Jesus, that he's the Son of God, and say, yeah, well, thanks, but no thanks, I'm going to reject him. And these people build their lives not on solid truth, not on solid ground, but on shifting sand. They build their life, their future, their hopes on shifting sand, on the shifting sand of what is culturally in fashion or what religious beliefs make them feel comfortable and fit what they are comfortable with. And one of the greatest shifting sands that people build their hope for the afterlife on today is the belief that everybody goes to heaven. The belief that all religions ultimately point to the same God, that all religions are just like spokes on a wheel that all point to the center, and it's all just different paths to get to the same place. A lot of people believe that. And that in the end, God will just accept everybody and bring them into heaven, except Hitler, of course, right? He's the one guy, he's not going to make it, right? Everybody but Hitler's going to make it into heaven. And a lot of people believe that. And that sounds nice. And I like that too. But just because it sounds nice doesn't mean it's true. And if you build your eternal hope on that, you may very well be building, and I would say you are, building your eternal hope on sand. Building your future on sand. And in the end, at the judgment, when you face God, your house will come crashing down and great will be the fall of it. The foolish builder builds his house not on solid truth, but on unreliable sources, on shifting sand, on what makes them feel comfortable. I want to take some time this morning to examine two unreliable sources for information on the afterlife. Two sources that people often go to for answers, but in fact may lead people to build their hopes for eternity on shifting sand instead of on the solid truth of the revealed Word of God. So, the first one I want to talk about is mediums. Mediums. Mediums are people who claim to communicate with the dead, who channel dead people. So you'll go to a medium and they will have a seance or something and communicate with the dead, and they will speak to you, and the words that they are saying, they're channeling the words of your deceased loved one or whoever it is you're trying to contact. This is what mediums do. And a lot of people, go to mediums. It's more prevalent than you might think. And people do this because they think maybe if we talk to people who have died, they will tell us what's going on in the afterlife, right? They will reassure us that everything is good, that they're okay, and that we're all accepted into heaven, right? That makes sense. Ask someone who is there what it's like. Well, there's a couple problems with mediums. The first problem is that most of them are frauds. Most of them are frauds. When I was a teenager, I used to watch this guy on occasion, not very often, but on TV, John Edward. He had a show called Crossing Over. Any of you seen that show? It was on for a little while. So he's a medium, self-proclaimed psychic medium. And in his show, he would have a studio audience, and he would start getting these messages from dead people, and all of a sudden it would be, oh, I'm getting something. Oh, you red-haired girl, I'm getting a message from your loved one. And they would be like, oh, he picked me. And he would tell them this amazing thing from beyond the grave. Well, it's been revealed that John Edward, like most mediums, uses these two techniques. One is called cold reading and one is called hot reading. Cold reading and hot reading. Cold reading is this it's a mind game sort of thing where you ask very vague questions and reveal very vague information to somebody, and then they feed you more details. And you say, oh, I'm seeing an elderly woman. Oh, that's my grandmother. Yes, it's your grandmother. Yes. Oh, yes, okay. And she had a very difficult passing. Oh, yes, she had cancer. Yes, I'm getting that. Yes, it was cancer, right? It's cold reading. And people, because they want to believe it, that it's true, they believe it. And so some of these guys are really, really good at cold reading. John Edward was one of them, is one of them. And now one of the things about his show that he had, this half-hour program, was that he would actually be in the studio with people for like 8 hours doing this, and then they would edit down just like the best 30 minutes of when he really got some good hits there. And all the stuff where he's way off, they just totally cut that out. But another technique that mediums use is hot reading. And hot reading is even more sneaky. Hot reading is where they plant people to find out information before the thing happens. So John Edward would have, one of his techniques is he would have people line up to get into the studio before it would start, and they would be waiting in line for like half an hour. And he would plant staff from his show to go and stand in line as well. And they would say, oh, hi, how are you today? Oh, yeah, where are you from? Oh, from Indiana. Oh, yeah, I'm from New York. Yeah, so who are you hoping to communicate with today? Oh, I'm hoping to communicate with my dead cousin Jimmy, right? And then they go, okay, and tell me about Jimmy. So they gather all the information, and then before the show starts, they go, okay, John, she's looking for her dead cousin Jimmy, and this is all the information. And then John just, oh, I know all this stuff about your dead cousin Jimmy. How amazing, right? They're frauds. This is the techniques that they use. In fact, another guy who, no relation, but his name is Mark Edward, he wrote a whole book called Psychic Blues, Confessions of a Conflicted Medium. This guy is a medium, and he goes through and he reveals all of the fraudulent techniques that mediums use. So, long story short, mediums, most of them are total frauds. So that's one reason we shouldn't trust anything they have to say, because they're just trying to get your money. Now, that being said, I'm not convinced that all mediums are frauds. Most of them are, but I think that some of them may actually communicate with spirits. But what I say is, I don't think that they're actually communicating with the spirits of dead people. I think they're communicating with evil spirits. I think they're communicating, as the Bible calls them, familiar spirits or demons. So the second problem with using mediums to find out information on the afterlife is that the use of mediums is condemned by God for good reason. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 to 12 says this. This is the law of God. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or daughter as an offering. Child sacrifice was a reality back in this time, and it still actually happens today in some places. Anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer, a witch, or a charmer, or a medium, or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. Whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. That's some of the strongest words. An abomination to the Lord. So why is God so dead set against trying to communicate with the dead? Well, two reasons. One, the first is that it's a distraction. It's a distraction. Places our faith in the wrong thing. Pulls us away from faith in God. Isaiah chapter 8, verses 19 to 20 says, and when they say to you, inquire of the mediums and the necromancers who chirp and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why are you inquiring of mediums? Don't inquire of them. You should be inquiring of God. Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living? And then verse 20 tells us what we should be inquiring of. To the teaching and to the testimony. The Bible, that's what we should be going to. If they will not speak according to this word, it's because they have no dawn. So, use of mediums is a distraction from faith in God and faith in His word and trust in what He has revealed to us and trust in Him and prayer to him instead of going to these mediums. The second reason, that what I mentioned earlier, that God forbids using mediums, is that they're demonic. Most are frauds, yes, but perhaps any real power that they have comes from the forces of hell. Any apparent experience of dead people, ghosts, people talk a lot about ghosts and have claimed to see ghosts and all these things. I believe that any of those supernatural experiences that people have, in order to fit into a biblical framework of understanding the spiritual world, you're looking at angels or demons. And in these cases, when people are posing as dead people, they're demons. It makes sense. They're trying to deceive us, trying to confuse us about what is to come and how we get to heaven and all these different things. 2 Corinthians 11:14 says, Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. I had a friend in high school. She used to tell me that when she was a little girl, she had a friend who would visit her in her room, and he was a ghost. He was an old man ghost, but he was friendly. She wasn't scared of him. They would have conversations. And I said, you gotta stay away from that. That's a demon. She's like, oh, I don't believe all that. But I'm like, you don't mess around with that stuff, okay? Oh, but he was friendly, he was nice. Yeah, but Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. His great deception is, oh, I'm good, I'm friendly, I'm safe. You can love me, you can trust me. You can't. He's a deceiver. He's the father of lies. Oh, but they know things about me. They know, they're my loved one, and they know things about my loved one, and they know things about me that only that person could know. Of course, demons are brilliant. Demons have been around since the beginning of creation. Demons have been watching you. Demons are watching us now. Demons know what's going on. Of course they know information. Don't be fooled by this stuff. The Bible condemns the use of mediums, and for good reason. We should stay away from this kind of stuff. And certainly not trust the words of fraudsters, and certainly not trust the words of demons who are trying to deceive when we're developing our understanding of what happens after death. So, the first unreliable source for information on the afterlife, mediums, communicating with the dead, not trustworthy. What about another source that people turn to for information on the afterlife? Near-death experiences. Near-death experiences. I actually really enjoy reading stories of near-death experiences. I find them fascinating. I really enjoyed the book Heaven is for Real. That was popular a little while ago, a couple years ago. There's a movie now. Another one, this 90 Minutes in Heaven by Don Piper, a pastor who was nearly killed in a car accident and claims to have spent, you guessed it, 90 minutes in heaven. I also was looking at this book earlier this week by this pastor, John Burke, in the United States. He wrote a book called Imagine Heaven. And Imagine Heaven tells over 1,000 stories of near-death experiences, outlines common experiences, common themes that emerge from almost all of these alleged near-death experiences. Some of the commonalities, the hovering over the body, you've heard that. I came out of my body, had an out-of-body experience. I could look down and see myself laying on the stretcher. A feeling of peace and love, these is a common theme. A tunnel that heads towards light, common theme. A welcoming party of previously deceased family and friends, greeting you when you arrive. The sense of God's presence. Bright light emanating from everything. And this author, John Burke, he notes, and I think he's not too far off in noting, that the Bible itself may support the concept of near-death experiences. There's actually this interesting story of the Apostle Paul being stoned, not high, but stoned to death with rocks. Clarify there. Stoned to the point of death. Acts chapter 14. And Acts 14, verses 19 to 20. So Paul experienced a lot of brutal beatings and imprisonment and all these different things for his witness to Christ. But this one takes the cake. This was the worst that Paul ever got it. Acts 14, verse 19. But Jews came from Antioch and Iconium, and having persuaded the crowds, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing he was dead. So, they stoned him, maybe to death. They thought he was dead anyway. They drag his lifeless body out of the city and ditch him, because that's what you do with a dead body. You just ditch it outside the city, left him for dead. What happens after that? The apostles come. When the disciples gathered about him, he rose up. He revives. Now, whether he was dead and was resurrected or whatnot, or he wasn't quite dead, but anyway, he revives, and somehow. And then he enters the city, goes back. On the next day, he went on with Barnabas to Derbe. I think one of the most amazing parts of the story is the fact that he went back to the city. What a guy. Man, he's so bold, right? I've just been beaten within an inch of my life. I'm going back. Paul, you fool, what are you doing? They still need Jesus. Anyway, beaten within an inch of his life. Dragged out of the body and left for dead. Dragged out of the city, left for dead. Then, years later, Paul writes about this experience that he had of heaven. And that's in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I'm going to turn there. And he writes in the third person. He refers to this person as somebody else that experiences, but he's talking about himself. He's just trying to be humble. He's making a point. Because the point is, I'm so humble, I'm not even going to refer to myself when I tell the story about what this great experience I had. But anyway, this is what he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. I know a man in Christ himself who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. The third heaven, in the Jewish understanding, there were three heavens. The first heaven was the atmosphere where the birds are and the clouds are. The second heaven was space where the planets were. And the third heaven is the heavenly realm, the spiritual dimension where God is. So he says, I was caught up, maybe a tunnel sort of experience, you might say. Caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. It was weird. It was like I wasn't even in my body, and it was like an out-of-body experience. I don't know. God knows. And I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, again, I don't know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. I can't even explain. I can't even describe to you. It's indescribable what I witnessed when I went to heaven. Now, this is interesting. And I think it's within reason. In fact, I think it's quite likely that this may have been a legit near-death experience. That Paul is referring to that time that he was beaten within an inch of his life. They thought he was dead. They dragged his body outside the city. And during that period of time, he had this near-death experience where he went to heaven and he had, and it was just, he couldn't even explain it. I think that's what he's describing in 2 Corinthians 12. Interesting. Now, not everybody who has a near-death experience has an experience of heaven. There are many accounts of people who also have supposedly had near-death experiences of hell. And these also have common themes. Most notably, people experiencing suffering and awaiting judgment. And that is also in keeping with Scripture. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about hell. So there are reasons to consider that the stories of near-death experiences may have some credibility. We shouldn't just write them completely off and say, no, they're not true. However, there are also several problems with near-death experiences that should be noted. I'm just going to highlight three. The first one, many scientists and medical professionals argue that there are scientific explanations for near-death experiences. That these experiences are projections of the brain that happen when you are on the verge of death. Well, that may explain some of these cases, but it can't explain all of them because so you have experiences in life, you're not hooked up to machines. The one time you're hooked up to machines and they're monitoring everything is when you're dying, okay? And so people in the hospital are hooked up, they're monitoring things like brain activity. And some of these near-death experiences have happened when people were clinically brain dead. So you can't explain it as brain activity in that situation. There's also some pretty crazy stories. I've been reading a lot of these this week. Some pretty crazy stories of people seeing things happening in the hospital while they were clinically dead that they wouldn't otherwise know. One story of this old man who was in a coma, and when he woke up, he claimed to have had a near-death experience, and his false teeth were missing because a nurse or hospital staff or someone had taken out his false teeth while he was in the coma and put them somewhere, and they were missing. Nobody could find them. And he said, "Oh, I know where they are." She put them in the drawer of this cart. And they went, and there they were. How did he know they were in the drawer of that cart? Because he said, "Oh, because when I was hovering above my body, I saw her do that." Right? There's no medical explanation for that. So I don't really think that science can explain it. But there is another problem, and that's in the subjective nature of the experiences. These are humans who are interpreting a profound experience. You're relying on a human's interpretation of something that is potentially indescribable. So, can we trust what they claim to have seen? Well, we're trusting their interpretation of what they saw. If it's beyond description, do we take their word for it when they describe it to us? So it's subjective, so we can't totally rely on it. And a third aspect that's difficult with it is that there are variations in details sometimes between one person and the next, and sometimes major details, like who is God, and what is he like, and who gets into heaven, and what is heaven like. And some of these variations, although there's commonalities, are very different and raise some red flags. One person will describe heaven in a certain way, and another person will explain it completely differently. And these are cause for concern, because, whose version is correct? It's impossible to know. And so, while there's some credibility with near-death experiences, and they can excite us and encourage us, and I get kind of into them, I think they're neat, the reality is near-death experiences are not a reliable source for information on the afterlife. Don't bet your eternity, that huge part of the rope, don't bet your eternity on the accounts of those who claim to have had near-death experiences. And certainly don't bet your eternity on the words of mediums, whether they're frauds or are in league with the devil. Eternity is a long time to just roll the dice and hope for the best. And it's a long time to base your beliefs and hopes on the subjective experience and interpretations of others. I think it's as foolish as building your house on shifting sand. So, as we wrap this up, my proposal as we move forward in this series, my proposal is that the Bible has the answers. I believe solid answers. Unchanging truth. Rooted in the fact that the Bible is literally the Word of God. Now, I know for some people that's a huge jump, and you need to go back and you need to look at the reliability of the Bible. But for me, I believe that this is completely reliable. I believe it's literally the Word of God, inspired by God, and I believe it's true, and we can bet our eternity on it. I would rather, let me put it this way, I would rather bet my eternity on God's revelation than on human observation. I think there's much more security in that. Have you ever heard of Pascal's wager? Pascal was a philosopher of years past. And if you go to the next slide, please. And the next slide. And the next slide. There we go. Pascal's wager. Pascal basically said that it's in your own best interest to believe and behave as if God exists. It's in your best interest to behave as God exists, since the possibility of eternal punishment in hell outweighs the advantage of believing otherwise. In other words, let me put it this way. If you choose to follow Jesus, and you choose to believe that the Bible's true, and what it says about the afterlife is true, and it turns out to be true, and you die and you go to heaven, and, oh, wow, God, you're real. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If you live like it's true, and it is, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Maybe you lose a few of the temporary pleasures of living a completely sinless life, but I don't even think that's worth it. Okay? You have everything to gain and nothing to lose if you live like it's true, and it's true. On the other hand, and this is what Pascal's wager is saying, if you live like it's not true, you say, well, it's not worth my time in this world to live like Jesus is real. I'm going to reject him and not believe in the Bible and all these things. And then you die and you realize, it was true, and you face God. You have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Hi, thanks for watching the video. We're trying an experiment here with video. It's kind of new to us, and the video cut short on Sunday, so we missed the tail end of the sermon. And I wanted to just sort of wrap it up for you here so you don't miss the conclusion. So basically what I want to say, just to conclude this message, is thinking about the logic of, is it worth it to consider that the Bible is true about the afterlife? And I would say it's worth your time to at least consider that what the Bible has to say about the afterlife is true. I think you owe that to yourself, to at least consider that. When I was a boy, growing up in a church, we used to have this blind traveling gospel singer come through from time to time. His name was Jerry Pride, and he used to sing this song, and I don't remember much of what he sang, but this song really stuck with me. It's called "What on Earth Are You Waiting For?" And these are the lyrics. It says, "What on earth are you waiting for? There's nothing here worth missing heaven for. Happiness is waiting at your heart's door. Let Jesus in. Let him in today. You've got heaven to gain, so what on earth are you waiting for?" Sometimes we focus so much on that little red part of our time on this earth, and we ignore the eternity of heaven. And you may plan a great vacation. You can plan for retirement. You can even plan your own funeral, your own death, all these different things. But have you planned for what matters most? Have you planned for eternity? Have you planned for the possibility that when you take your last breath in this world, you may come face to face with God? So over the course of these next several weeks, as I bring these messages, we're going to dig into the Bible. We're going to see what it says about heaven and how to get there. And spoiler alert, heaven and hell are real. This is what the Bible teaches. People who die today will wake up in heaven or wake up in hell. There's no in between, and there's no going back. The teaching of the Bible is very clear on that. Though Jesus is the way to heaven, he's the only way to heaven. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes unto the Father except through me." The Bible says there's no other name given under heaven by which we must be saved but the name of Jesus Christ. So we're going to be talking more about that as we go along, and I hope that you will continue to tune in if you're not able to join us here in person, but you'll tune in online and check out these messages. God bless you. To be continued.